Do you want to learn how to read tarot cards intuitively? You might be surprised to learn that it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. Stay tuned to learn how to use your intuitive style to read tarot cards. Hi everybody, I'm Sue Ellen Clayton. Welcome to my channel where we're learning how to read tarot, one card at a time. In today's video, we'll be using 2 3-card spreads to practice reading cards intuitively. I'll also describe your intuitive approach and provide 15 things to consider when you're reading cards intuitively. I will be using the Rider-Waite Tarot, and there's a link below. So let's get started. Reading tarot cards intuitively is the opposite from using a book to find the traditional or accepted meaning. Instead, you rely on your own feelings and impressions, and that may give you a very different result. Let me give you an example so you understand what reading intuitively means, and then we'll dig deep into how to actually do it. Let's use the Fool for an example, and we're going to try to figure out what this card means. It is the first card in the major arcana. The Fool card traditionally means new beginnings, starting a new phase in life, or approaching life with a childlike curiosity or innocence. Those are some of the traditional meanings that you would say if you drew the Fool card in a reading. But how do you read this card intuitively? Let's say that I have no prior knowledge of tarot. I open my brand new box of cards, and the Fool is the first one. So I'm going to figure out what the Fool card means based solely on my thoughts and feelings. Let's start with our thoughts, and I'm going to give you my impressions in a stream of consciousness way. First, let me say that reading intuitively requires you to trust your first impressions, no matter how weird or stupid you think they are. Don't censor yourself. Try to keep your logical brain out of the mix and try not to judge yourself. I'm going to share my observations to give you an idea of what might come to mind. So here we go. The Fool is standing on the edge of a cliff, so he must be very trusting. He's wearing fancy clothing, so he must be really vain. Or he has a lot of money to spend on clothing, so he must be really rich. He has a white rose in his left hand, so he must be romantic. It's sunny in the card, so this is a very happy situation. But I see snow-capped mountains beside him and icebergs in the sea below. So despite the sunshine, the atmosphere is actually colder than it looks. It's like the card is telling me that he is hot and cold about something. I wonder what that could be. He has a barking dog at his feet. I think the dog is warning him. The dog looks like he's going to jump off the cliff. This guy's looking at the sky instead of at the dog. He's obviously not very observant. Maybe he doesn't even like dogs. Maybe he doesn't notice he's there. Maybe he hears the dog, but he's ignoring him. Maybe he's somebody who's choosing not to heed some kind of warning in his life. And finally, he looks like he's basking in the sun. That makes me think of a school project I did about ravens. I learned that ravens actually bask in the sun because it can dry their feathers and also keeps parasites from eating their feathers. Maybe he's got some kind of parasite that's clouding his judgment. I also learned that ravens can have a wingspan of up to 4 feet and have been known to kill cattle. So maybe this guy appears to be nice, but he's actually a killer. And he's run away to this remote area so he won't get caught. Hopefully you get the idea. It feels like I'm just stringing together random thoughts, but I need to trust that these ideas came to me for a reason. Now let's look at using my feelings to interpret these cards, and the same deal applies. Say what you're feeling and don't censor yourself. I open my fresh box of Rider-Waite-Smith cards and look at the Fool. I see him standing on the edge of the cliff, and all of a sudden I feel panic. He's not paying attention. He looks like he could walk off the cliff. Oh my goodness, it reminds me of the time I fell off the end of the dock when I was at summer camp and almost drowned. So I feel like the Fool is in grave danger. I want to warn him to be careful because something bad could happen. So that is totally a gut reaction. Here's another scenario. I open my box of tarot cards and pull out the Fool. It looks like he's dressed in a costume and he's standing on a stage. It reminds me when I played a small part in the school play when I was in high school. I was so excited. I practiced my lines for weeks. And then I got on stage and all my hard work paid off. I was brilliant. Everybody applauded, and it was one of the happiest days of my life. Listening to people clap for me was euphoric. I felt like I could do anything. I think that's how the Fool is feeling. He's full of confidence. He's on top of the world. Nothing is going to stop him from getting where he wants to go. So those are some examples of reading a card intuitively. Before we get to the specifics of reading intuitively, I want to talk about the different types of intuition. And then we'll talk about 15 specific things to consider when you're looking at a card. And we're going to continue using the Fool as an example. And let's talk about the different kinds of intuitive abilities. These are also sometimes called psychic senses. These are the keys to being able to read cards intuitively, and it will be different for everybody. I want to cover these briefly because you may think that you don't have intuitive abilities because you don't experience things the way other people do. And I'll tell you my story in a minute. I think of intuitive abilities to be very much like learning styles. Back in the old days when I went to school, they figured that everybody learned by listening, and that's how schools were set up. Fortunately, I am an auditory learner, and I did well. But then they discovered there are many different types of learning styles. Some people are visual learners. They learn best through images or charts. Some people are kinesthetic learners. They learn best through hands-on activities and physical movement. Some people are social learners. They learn best in groups. And there are many more. You have a much better chance of success if you know your learning style. And the same thing is true with reading cards intuitively. Once you know how you get your intuitive information, you can apply it to reading tarot cards. So let's talk briefly about the 7 types of intuitive abilities and how they apply to reading tarot cards. The first kind of intuitive ability is clairvoyance. This is the ability to see things in your mind's eye. This is the most common among my friends, and I don't have any of this ability. I literally cannot close my eyes and visualize a straight line. So I didn't think that I had any kind of intuitive ability until I worked one-on-one with somebody a few years ago. Clairvoyants can see all kinds of cool things. They might have visions that can range from a color or symbol to being able to see detailed, vivid scenes almost like they are watching a movie. Some clairvoyants can see spiritual beings such as angels, some can see auras, others can see past lives or see what will happen in the future. So that is clairvoyance, and if you have this ability, you might actually see things in the cards. For example, you might see a white aura around the little dog and interpret that to mean that the dog is actually a spirit that is protecting the Fool on his journey. The second kind of intuitive ability is clairaudience, which is the ability to hear voices beyond the physical realm. I've had a couple of friends like this, and it was always a bit freaky. I'd be talking with them, and they were simultaneously hearing voices from their spirits or guides. Some people hear full sentences, and others just hear a word or two. Others hear music, bells, whispers, and messages from people who have passed away. If you have clairaudience, you may hear things about the cards. For instance, you might hear the Fool thinking that he is the master of his destiny, and he's no longer letting his childhood trauma hold him back. The third kind of intuitive ability is clairsentience, and this means that people have the ability to sense emotions or physical sensations in other people. I do this all the time with my family. I can walk into a room, and if my daughter has a headache, I'll get a headache too. It also works with emotions. If I'm having a great day and encounter someone who is sad, the sadness takes over my beings. So if you remember all of the examples I gave earlier about the Fool, they are all feelings-based, because it didn't even occur to me to talk about hearing voices from the cards because I just don't have that ability. If you are clairsentient, you might be able to look at the card and sense how the Fool is feeling physically or emotionally. For example, you can feel that he has a lump in his throat. Even though he's putting on a brave face, he is fighting back tears of sadness. The fourth kind of intuitive ability is claircognizance, and that means that you receive intuitive knowledge without having any explanation. I've been able to do this my whole life, and I just thought I was weird because I would get impressions of people that were completely opposite to the way they presented themselves. This happened to me recently when someone was describing their family situation, where the mother was living with her son and daughter in their late 20s. The mother and daughter's mental health had deteriorated significantly since the son moved home, and suddenly, with no other information, I just knew he was the cause. And sadly, I was not wrong. If you have claircognizance, you can just look at cards and you feel like you know things that are true. So maybe you look at the card and feel like the Fool is going to be offered the job of his dreams today. There's really nothing in the picture to indicate that, which is what makes claircognizance really hard to trust. The fifth kind of intuitive ability is Clairalience, and that is the ability to smell beyond the physical realm. This person might be able to smell your dad's cigars or your mom's perfume. So you look at the Fool card and all of a sudden you smell smoke, and you realize that the Fool has fled after his house burned down, and all he had time to pack was this tiny little satchel that he has with him. The sixth kind of intuitive ability is Clairgustance, and that is the ability to taste beyond the physical realm. Sometimes they taste nice stuff like chocolate chip cookies, and sometimes it's not so nice, such as blood. So perhaps you look at the Fool and you can taste lemons, and it makes you think of making lemonade with your grandmother and sitting on her porch during the hot summer days. And you conclude that the Fool is thinking about his grandmother. The final kind of intuitive ability is Clairtangency, more commonly known as Psychometry. And these are people who can hold an object and get information about the owner or past events associated with it. A lot of times you'll see people holding a wristwatch or some other personal object from someone who's passed over, and they can get information about the person who owned it. I wanted to mention this for completeness' sake, but it doesn't really apply to looking at the cards. However, it would apply if you could get your hands on someone's tarot deck. For instance, you could probably get a lot of good information about me if you were to hold my tarot deck. So I hope this gives you an idea about the different kinds of intuition and how it would work reading cards. So now let's talk about 15 ways to connect with the cards. Be aware of any thoughts, feelings, words, knowings, visions, sounds, tastes, or impressions that come to you. Once again, I remind you to not censor yourself, but just trust in what comes up with you. I will also be using the word querent as we discuss how to connect with the cards. If you're not familiar with this term, querent means the person who is asking the question in a tarot reading. We're going to move away from the Fool and use a different card for each type of connection. So here we go. Number 1, notice your first impression. Look at the Two of Swords. What is the first thing you notice? There are so many details on the card. What do you notice first? Is it the blindfold, the swords, the arms crossed over her heart, her shoes, the moon? I noticed the blindfold. So if I'm reading this card intuitively, I would say that this card has to do with the person not wanting to see something. Card number 2. Notice your overall feelings. Look at the Six of Cups. How does it make you feel? Does it make you feel warm and nostalgic? Does it make you feel sad because it reminds you of a childhood love that broke your heart? Does it remind you of your daughter's wedding last year in a courtyard? So if I'm reading intuitively, I would say that this person is clearly in love and they will never lose their feelings of romance. Number 3, notice the main figure or figures on the card. Let's look at the Nine of Cups. What is he doing? How does he make you feel? Many people call this the wish card and love it because it shows satisfaction, contentment, and all of his dreams being realized. I never feel that way. This card always reminds me of a very smug friend I have who is constantly bragging about how much money he has. So if I'm reading intuitively, I would say that this person gets a lot of satisfaction from telling people how rich he is. Number 4, look at the weather. For this example, we'll be looking at the Five of Pentacles. What color is the sky? Is it yellow, blue, or gray? Is the card windy or calm? Are there clouds? Is there any kind of precipitation? What feelings does the weather invoke in you? In this card, there is already snow on the ground, and it is continuing to snow. We can tell they are walking into the wind by the way the skirt and tunic are blowing. It's clearly cold, and to make things worse, they are not wearing shoes. So if I'm reading intuitively, I would say that this card represents a time when the querent couldn't stop shivering, perhaps because they had a fever. Number 5, notice the time of day. Is it morning or evening or midday? Can you see the sun or the moon or the stars? Look at the Eight of Cups. He's walking away in moonlight. The moon makes everything look still and peaceful. So if I'm reading intuitively, I would say that we have a person who is traveling at night because he doesn't want to be noticed or to disturb anyone. Number 6, notice any animals. In the Moon card, we see a dog, a wolf, and a crayfish or lobster. Look at the animals and see what they represent to you. Do you like one? Do you dislike one? In my case, I am definitely allergic to lobster, and that's where my focus goes. So if I'm reading intuitively, I would say that this card is a warning to be careful because something unexpected could take you by surprise and potentially kill you. Number 7, notice the vegetation, including flowers, fruits, and vegetables. Let's look at the Magician. We see flowers in many of the cards, and they all have specific meanings. Traditionally, white lilies symbolize purity and innocence. But what do they mean to you? Personally, I love lilies, and my name, Susan, actually means white lily. But when I look at lilies, I think of my mother, who absolutely hates the smell of lilies because they remind her of funerals. So I always have to place a special order when I'm sending her flowers. And I'm letting you know that it is tough to buy an arrangement without lilies. So when I see lilies, I think of both my name and my mother not liking them. So if I'm reading intuitively, I would think that the querent might soon be experiencing the death of a loved one. As an aside, I wouldn't tell someone this if I was just learning and didn't trust my intuition. I'm not sure that I would say this under any circumstances because I don't think it would be helpful. But we're learning, and that is what came to mind, and I'm sticking with this example. Number 8, take a look at the symbols. Look at the 9 of Swords. There are lots of symbols on this card that will have a specific meaning to you. I'm a 5th-generation quilter, so the first thing I noticed was the quilt. You might notice the yellow pillow or the gruesome scene on the bedpost. The quilts make me happy, which is not how people would normally interpret this card. But I feel like quilts provide a lot of comfort and that the love of the quilt maker is captured in the process. So if I'm reading intuitively, I would say that, even in difficult times, the querent needs to remember that they are protected and loved. Number 9, look at the colors. Let's look at the Devil. How do the colors make you feel? The blue background, cold blue wings and horns, and orange colors remind me of sitting around a campfire on a dark night and feeling a connection with the circle of people around me. So if I'm reading intuitively, I would say that you can make it through dark times in your life if you rely on a support system of family and friends. Number 10, look at their posture and position. For this example, we are using the 10 of Wands. Think about the posture and positions of the people in the cards. Are they sitting, kneeling, lying down, or standing? Are they moving? Do they look comfortable? How does their posture and position make you feel? In the 10 of Wands, we see a man who is stooped over and carrying 10 wands towards the village in the most uncomfortable way possible. His head is downcast and he appears to be working extremely hard. I had a neck injury due to a car accident many years ago and still experience a lot of pain. When I look at this card, I feel my neck hurt and also a feeling of exhaustion. So if I'm reading intuitively, I would say that the querent is dealing with a person or situation that is a pain in his neck. Number 11, look at the interactions between the people in the card. For this example, we'll use the 6 of Pentacles. How are the people interacting? Who do you relate to in the image and why? Do you feel like the nobleman who is doling out coins, the person in gold receiving coins, or the boy in blue looking onward with his hands outstretched? When I look at this card, I always relate to the boy in blue who is doing without, which is a sad commentary on my life. So if I'm reading intuitively, I would say that the querent is feeling left out and like he is not getting what he deserves. Number 12, look at the facial expressions. One example is the 7 of Pentacles. How do you think they are feeling? Are they happy, sad, serious, focused, excited, joyful, tired, miserable, or contemplative? In this card, we see a gardener who looks exhausted. It looks like he's working hard but not getting the results he wants. Do you think he's going to persevere or give up? Does he need to take a break or ask for help? If I'm reading intuitively, I'd say that the querent has reached the point of exhaustion and needs to come up with a plan to take care of their mental or physical health. Because there's still more work to do, and he needs to make changes if he's to carry on, perhaps by asking for help or taking a break, or maybe it's time to abandon the project. Number 3, team. Look at the direction of their gaze. For this example, we'll use the Five of Cups. Look at what the people are focused on. What does that mean to you? The man in the Five of Cups has his head down and is looking at the ground. It looks to me like he is hanging his head in shame. All he can see is his feet. So if I'm reading intuitively, I would say that this person is focusing on what he is ashamed of to the point that he can't see all the good things around him. It's time for him to let go of his shame and reconnect with his world. Number 14, look at their clothing. In this example, we'll look at the Strength card. She is wearing a simple white dress with flowers in her hair and around her waist. To me, she looks like an ordinary woman who loves nature, not a royal or rich person like most of the other women we see in the deck. So if I'm reading intuitively, I would say that even though the querent doesn't think that she has any special abilities, she really does. Once she figures out what they are, she will be able to do extraordinary things. Number 15, determine if the characters are on a stage. For this example, we'll be looking at the Eight of Pentacles. Pamela Coleman Smith, the illustrator of the deck, had a background in the theater and sometimes pictured the characters on stage. These cards can represent a separation between the characters and the rest of the world, or the fact that they are playing a role rather than being real. In the Eight of Pentacles, we see a young man working hard at a trade. We see 6 perfect specimens displayed on the tree. He's working on a 7th, and he has discarded the 8th. Because he is on a stage, it appears that he has separated himself from the village behind him so that he can get work done. I'm guessing this is the tarot version of taking your laptop to Starbucks. If I were reading this card intuitively, I would ask the querent if they are spending too much time isolating themselves working and not enough time being with their community. So that's the end of 15 ways to connect with the cards intuitively. Now we're going to have some fun and apply what you've learned to 2 different examples where I'll demonstrate reading spreads intuitively. The first example answers the question, will I be able to move forward after the loss of my spouse? And will assume that the querent is a woman. I'll be using the past, present, future spread. And I'm going to attempt to read these cards based totally on my feelings towards the cards and not the traditional meanings. So here we go. The past position is the events or circumstances that led to the current situation. In the past position, we see the Hermit. I can see that the card feels dark and cold. You are facing towards the past. Your head is down and you look sad. It looks like you've been spending a lot of time alone. Your clothes look like you are in mourning. There is light in your right hand, but it's facing toward the past, so I think it represents your spouse and he's all you can think about. That's been all you can focus on for a long time. Your feet are on snow and it looks like you could topple over, so you're no longer sure of your footing since he passed. Your world feels dark and cold. You feel very alone. The present card describes what is happening in the querent situation right now. In the present position, we have the Page of Cups. Now the sky is brighter, which is a good sign. You look like you're actually having fun and feeling a bit creative. You're still facing towards the past, but you were talking to your husband, who is now a fish and taking up less room in your life than the lantern. You are regaining your sense of humor. Your clothing is bright and cheerful. Your feet are on firm ground. There's a slight smile on your face. The weather looks warmer. You're on a stage, so I can't tell if you're still feeling separated from other people or if you're putting on an act of happiness. I hope this means that you are healing. Finally, we have the Future card, which gives us insight into what will happen in the querent's life based on their current path. Now let's look at the future, which is the Six of Swords. I'm assuming that the widow is in yellow. There are rough waters on your right side and calmer waters on the left. I think you have navigated the rough seas and are moving towards calmer times. You're facing forward. There is a break in the swords in front of you, and it looks like you no longer feel imprisoned by your grief. You have accepted your husband is gone, but you still feel like he is supporting you, that he is actually steering the boat and taking you to a new destination. You have enough energy to take care of your child, so you have regained your place as a parent. You're still wearing a cloak like you were in the Hermit card, but this time it is a brighter color. This makes me think that your bright clothing in the previous card was part of an act to pretend that you were okay, but you really weren't. Now it looks like a new day is dawning. You are facing toward the future. There are easier times ahead, but grieving will still be a long process. Now let's look at another set of 3 cards on a much less heavy subject. This time we will assume that the querent is a male, and the question is, should I go back to college and get my degree? We will be using a 3-card situation, guidance, challenge spread. So in the situation position, this card shows the main focus of the reading. In the challenge position, the card highlights the main obstacle that the querent is facing. And in the guidance position, this card offers advice on how to address the challenge and move forward. So let's answer the question, should he go to college and get his degree? The situation shows the main focus of the reading, specifically why the querent didn't get his degree, and we drew the Fool. My intuitive interpretation is that, rather than go to college, the querent decided to travel. He went to a mountainous area, he traveled light, he stopped to smell the roses. He didn't think about what was happening next. He felt like everything was sunny and positive. He was a free spirit and dressed how he wanted. He didn't want anyone telling him what to do. He spent time with his dog. He's looking toward the past, and those adventures are now behind him. The challenge card is about the main challenge that the querent is facing. I drew the 5 of Pentacles, and that challenge is money. He's afraid that he will be living in poverty, that he won't be able to afford health care or even warm clothing. He believes that going back to school will be an extreme financial hardship. He doesn't believe that anyone will help him. He wants to move forward, but believes that it will be difficult. He feels that he will be left out in the cold. The 3rd card is the guidance and provides advice about how the querent could move forward. And I drew the Strength card. In this card, we see that the sun has come out again. The mountains are far in the background, so the past is behind him. Spring has come. The cold, brutal days are in the past. We see a woman with her hand on the lion's snout. A lion is the king of the jungle. It is big and ferocious. Yet she's found a way to tame it. She has figured out a way to manage the problem. The querent is no longer looking at the past. He is focused on the lion and the solution. I have to admit that I got stuck here because I knew the meaning of the Strength card. So I kept wanting to slide into the meaning, which I think was appropriate. The Strength card is about having the courage to face your fears, which in this case is returning to school. It's about approaching situations with compassion and self-control and being patient as you work to achieve your goal. So it totally fits. He can go back to school if he is patient with himself and summons his courage. It may be a long process, as it would be to tame a lion, but he will get there. So I hope you found these examples helpful. Before I go, I just wanted to say 3 things about intuition. First of all, learn what kind of intuition works for you. As I said earlier, I cannot visualize a straight line and never thought I was intuitive. When I learned that I was actually able to feel things, it opened me up to really trusting myself. Secondly, it's important that you try to shut down your critical mind and trust your first impression. Some of the stuff I said as I was analyzing these cards sounded pretty weird, but the more you do it, the better you will get and the more you trust yourself. Finally, intuition is like a muscle. It will get better if you use it, so keep practicing. I hope this video gave you some ideas that you can apply to your tarot practice, specifically reading intuitively. Please leave a comment if you'd like to share what you've learned. And if you're not already a subscriber, I'd love to have you subscribe to this channel so that you don't miss anything. And I'll see you next time.